Welcome to The Bone, the podcast that goes deeper. Here we cut through the noise and get straight to the core of the issues that matter. From real stories to raw truths, we dive deep into the conversations that shape our world and challenge our thinking. We're not afraid to dig in and get to the marrow of it all. Whether it's life, culture, or business in sports medicine, we're here to break it down raw and real. No filters, no fluff, just to the bone. With your host, Shelby Daly, we're getting to the bone. This is a clinically pressed, approved CEU podcast. Find the quiz to gain credit at clinicallypressed.org/courses. Clinically Pressed Company, making the complicated simple through results that give back. Find out more at clinicallypressed.org. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Bone. Today we're joined by Austin Martinez, an athletic trainer who's made a name for himself by blending clinical experience with business leadership. He is the Vice President of Training and Experience he was at Stretch Lab, and now is the Senior Vice President of Operations at iFlex Stretch Studios. So he's based in California. We've ran into each other multiple times. We both were in school about the same time, even though he's a Chapman graduate. Won't hold it against him. And I'm a CBU graduate, but, we ran in the same circles and have a lot of the same ideas or perceptions of athletic training. I really wanted to have him on because he's taken a totally different direction with his degree, which I think is great. And I think it's very influential on the world of athletics and health. So welcome to the show, Austin.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the amazing intro. And it's so great to see you again, Shelby. And I'm just really grateful to be on here. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about what it means to take a corporate route of athletic training and how it differentiates from the traditional path and what opportunities exist. Before we pressed play, we were just talking about, the education system and the traditional roles. I don't know if you want to dive into that right off the bat and we can go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Let's have fun with it. I think when I look back on, our time, and this would be a decade ago now that we graduated,
Basically.
Which is sad to say, right? But, a decade plus, I think so much has changed in the world, right? Like how the world works, economy, job systems, skill sets, all of that. And when I look at like today, if I were to talk to someone coming out of school, I would say the most important thing is not necessarily the degree, but the skill sets you get. Because we're in a skill set economy. It's not necessarily a degree economy, right? A degree is nice because you learn certain skill sets. You could learn those skill sets online. You can learn them through a mentor, right? So obviously in some roles, you still need to have that piece of paper, but you're seeing different companies, right? Like Google, a massive behemoth. They're basically saying, hey, if you're a coder, the degree's cool, but also, we're hiring at such a fast pace. We're happy to teach you. So go through our certificate programs, no experience needed. And you can have similarities. And so obviously in some areas you need to gatekeep that, right? Depending on the type of work you do and the regulations and such. I think gone are the days where it's that traditional sick route, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm going to law school, I'm going to be a lawyer, right? Or I'm going to, I'm getting a kinesiology or an athletic training degree, I'm going to be an athletic trainer. I think there's so much value in what you learn in our degree setting. And, I was telling you before this, I'm even seeing people in the business setting that I'm crossing that are PTs or are athletic trainers or even MDs, right? And they're working more in the business setting than they are in whatever that traditional path is, right? Clinical healthcare. And at first it kind of caught me off guard, right? Especially an MD. I'm like, wow, you went to school for, call it 10, 15 years, right? You devoted a lot of that time to go down that path and here you are. But there's just a lot of opportunities, right? Opportunities have grown so much really over the last decade. And, I always kind of come back to it. It's about your engagement with the work, right? Are you energized by it? Is it something you're passionate about? Is it something that, you align with, right? With your values. So if those things check the mark, it's always great to have an open mind with that. And I think it's okay to think about that, right? I look back in my time and, we were chatting about it before, but it almost kind of felt a decade ago. Like if you weren't super all in on traditional athletic training, it was kind of like an us versus them mentality, right? You kind of felt it either from, the professors or the organization, like, no, you have to go down that path. And it's like, that wasn't really the only choice, right? There's a lot of options. Yeah, we could go any way you want with that. We could go down for like 2 hours, right? I'm passionate about that subject, but that's where I'll
Yeah.
start. That's where I'll start.
Well, and that's where I see this momentum on LinkedIn where it's we need to define what we are. And I don't think we need to box ourselves in. I think, everybody talks about elevator speeches. You should have your speech ready. And from what I've learned is you should be able to have a pitch deck for any situation on who you're providing that information to. And I think it's that flexibility to be able to talk to an athletic director, a medical doctor, a regular person on the street to educate them on what we do and the skills that we provide. And I think the rigidity of these programs is there's the business aspect, and that's what's kind of holding us back is, well, how do you get out there and sell yourself? I mean, we don't want to be the sleazy salesman, but at the same time, you need that skill to be able to enter any door and be able to flow with the conversation. And with all the skills that we keep adding to our scope, we can fit anywhere. And that's what we aren't taking advantage of, but we're not necessarily talking about that early enough in the career of, you could go into medical sales technically, and you can be a better salesman because you can talk to that patient much easier because you have the skills to educate them. You have the skills to educate an MD. You have the vocabulary to talk to both parties. And I think that's why you see, even with the work-life balance that it provides, I think a shift to the medical sales portion of it is we have those skills. That's why we fit so easy into it.
I actually saw a great LinkedIn post that actually highlighted how a lot of the best medical sales reps are actually athletic trainer backgrounds for exactly what you spoke about, right? I think a lot of if I were to take the athletic training degree or the background and sum it up to like characteristics or behaviors, it's hardworking, it's disciplined, it's, forward thinking, it's critical thinking, and it's great conversationalists, right? And the beauty of that is that those 5 or 6 skills are very, very useful in many other places as well, right? So to your point, how you talk about yourself or how you have conversations, it's very important, right? If I look at the work I do today, I had a conversation recently this week with a really great AI movement technology platform because we're looking at introducing that within our studios. And I know AI is kind of buzzwords right now, but we're really trying to be thoughtful about it. So it's not super cheesy, but, I'm talking to their CEO and their CTO, and, these guys have, MD backgrounds, they have PT backgrounds, they have, great software engineering backgrounds. So we can speak the same language, which is great. And then obviously I have the understanding of, what a consumer in today's health and wellness industry is looking for. So I'm trying to marry those things. So that might be one conversation. Another conversation I had the other day was, with a business vendor, just looking at, like a type of service we might bring in, whether that's like red light or, heat, compression, all those things. So I guess the point I'm making is you're exactly right, right? Knowing how to present yourself and knowing who you're talking to is important. Because if I start every conversation with, hey, I'm Austin Martinez and I'm an athletic trainer and I know anatomy really well and I can do, a Lockman test and I'm really great at building relationships with, key stakeholders. That's not always going to hit, right? That actually was I will kind of give you some information. That was my talk track, say 10 years ago when I didn't really know anything about selling myself, business, let's just call it the world, right? The economy, right? And how to fit yourself into the world. That was my talk track. And a lot of people were just like, okay, that sounds cool. But like, what is, right? It was the conversations. What is an athletic trainer? How could they be helpful in this setting? So over time, I've kind of learned those things as I've kind of developed myself through books, reading books, attaching on to other mentors. But it is it's a niche skill. And it absolutely is something that, young professionals would want to learn very early on, right? Which kind of goes back to your original point, and it can be tremendously valuable for them for the longevity of their career.
Yeah. Well, and you have to be able to formulate your mind around what you're learning. We've learned how to evaluate a potential pitch. It's an evaluation of an injury. You have to have them kind of come to you and give you a little bit of information of what their problem is, their concern, whatever it is. And then you take that and you build a program off of that or your pitch or whatever. So we have the skills. You just have to have that mind shift to be able to do it in a business aspect of how are you going to sell your skills and make sure they're comfortable and utilizing them in their business or whatever it may be that you're pitching. I mean, I remember I came down to Irvine and tried to pitch you on, a breathing program.
No,
and
that's awesome,
that
yeah.
was cool to talk about. I mean, the company
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily at that point, but it's just having those conversations of, you know, something that you're really passionate about or interested in, and seeing how it fits into the bigger picture of what that company or project is trying to accomplish. So, you know, I think we get very rigid of we need to stay in the clinic or the sideline, and that's where we're at. But we're so good at building programs or, you know, policies, whatever it may be. You can go in and implement it in any business or whatever it may be. You just have to sell it very well, convince them that it's something that will help, you know, with the ROI, with the productivity. You know,
Right.
you just have to figure out what their pain points are and what they're trying to do to be better as a business.
You're so spot on. And one of my favorite quotes, lessons, whatever you want to call it, that I learned, early on when I got into this industry that's been helpful for me is you can have anything you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want, right? So,
Hmm.
and so what I mean by that is, if I want something, right, I want to change if I'm listening to this, right, as a young professional or, a seasoned professional, I want to kind of change paths, or I want to figure out what's that next path, or I know exactly what I want. That's the way to go about it, right? Is understanding, building relationships. What are the people that you're trying to follow in their footsteps, or what are the people that work where you want to work, right? What is it that they want? What is it that's of interest of them? And how can you help align and solve problems? And I think that's just a good general lesson in overall. Part of my role as well, I spent a lot of time like developing people that work in some of our stores. So these are general managers, these are stretch therapists that have, kinesiology backgrounds, athletic training backgrounds, massage therapy backgrounds, personal training backgrounds, so on and so forth. So obviously we have like the language connection, but the common theme that I find sometimes when people aren't able to achieve where they're trying to get to, or they're just not finding that path, is they're kind of focused on the self, right? It's like, what do I want for me, right? And it's like, because I show up, or because I do X, or, because I am who I am, because I have a degree, or because I have this experience, I should automatically get one, right? And it's like, would love the world to work out that way, right? But that's definitely not how it eventually works out, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, so with you kind of went corporate route right out of graduation, correct?
Pretty close. Yeah. I love telling this story, actually. Funny enough, I use this talk track a lot, like when I'm talking to like prospective franchise owners who want to buy a franchise, or when I'm talking to employees that go into stores and they're like, "Hey, I want to grow," and I'm like, "Yeah, you can do it." Kind of the story, right? To give the full picture to everyone. When I look back before even going to undergrad at Chapman, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I knew I liked sports. I played sports and I was good at it. And I said, okay, well, I like sports and I'm really good at AP biology, right, in high school. So how could I marry those things? So originally, funny enough, I was like, well, maybe I'll go to med school. And my mom was great at like talking me out of that, of like, you do not have the discipline and the execution at that time period, right? And I was like, you know what? Hindsight, yes, I did not have the discipline or the hindsight. I had the cockiness, right, but and the confidence, but I didn't have the discipline. So I started visiting schools, and a lot of these schools were offering athletic training, sports medicine, kinesiology types of degrees, and I started listening to going to these visits and hearing about what the program would look like, and I got really interested. So, long story short, ended up at Chapman in Orange County. Incredible experiences. I have so many best friends that I still keep in touch with. I have nothing but respect for the teachers we had, and they were all top class, right? And so overall, fantastic experience. Got to learn so much, do so much, all that. Once I finished undergrad, truthfully, I was really committed to going to be a physician's assistant in orthopedics. I had started taking like summer classes. I had started taking, those things to kind of meet the requirements, right? And I'd done a lot of research down like what schools to go to, the 2-year program, what could I do after. And I had a great experience. I want to say my junior year or my senior year, where I went on like an extracurricular. We went to Australia to go to the Australian Sports Medicine Institute.
Hmm.
Right there, I kind of switched gears because we went to that program, and I kind of started thinking more like, okay, maybe I want to be less in a clinical setting, and maybe I want to be more in like a performance setting, right? And that was helpful too. So then I said, okay, well now, I spent a lot of effort going down the PA route. What am I going to do? What can get me in the performance setting? So I thought I was going to maybe like go work in a biomechanics lab, go work with like professional athletes, things like that. That just proved to be kind of difficult to find avenues. So this doesn't sound good, but I'll say it on, on recording. I kind of just said like, what's the next best bet? Why don't I just go pay for more school and then I'll figure it out then, right? So I started looking into graduate schools in athletic training. And as you know, they don't do this anymore, but at the time, some of these graduate schools, it was like that post accredited, I forget what it's called, but they'll pay for your degree and you'll work for them, right? You don't make a lot of money, which is fine, but they'll pay for your degree. So there was only like 8 or 10 schools, I think, at the time. And I toured all of them. I got accepted to most of them. And I landed on Ohio University, which is in Athens. And mainly because it was just like a really cool town. I loved the programs. I really got hooked on Chad Starkey. So, he's like, I mean, we all know if we're in athletic training, like that's the dude, right? He's on all the books. So I was like, I want to meet the dude, right? I want to peer behind the curtain and see what the Wizard of Oz looks like and, what's going on there. And so had great 2 experiences, 2 years experience there. I got to work with him a lot. He was my mentor and he helped me with my capstone and I met my wife there, which is awesome. So all worked out well there, right? And so in between my first and my second year, Dr. Starkey actually set me up with a professional baseball internship because I'd kind of decided at that time, okay, I can get into performance. Maybe I'll work in professional baseball. I love baseball. Got to do that. Worked in New York for a little bit in their low A team. So these were people that literally just got drafted, right? First round, second round, third round picks. A month, like 2 weeks later, they literally report to this team. So I got to work with like really high level guys. And it was cool because at Ohio University, I was working with collegiate baseball. So these were guys that I might have been working with and then they just got drafted and now they're here, right? So it's a different setting. Got to work in the Astros sports medicine and performance department. And at the time, I don't know if that's the case anymore, but I can say with confidence at the time, which would have been like 2016, they were really on the forefront of technology. They were the first to introduce the TrackMan, which if you don't know what the TrackMan is, that's the thing that like kind of tracks how the pitches move and it tracks like how the ball gets hit out. And that's like so commonplace now. If you watch a baseball game, it almost shows you like the spray chart of how the ball moves or how the pitch moves and the degrees of movement with it. No one was doing it back then. They were the first to do it. They were the first. They had like Firefly technology. They had a chief scientist that would, look at the recovery for the athletes and decide like, hey, they need to go through this protocol before, they pitch, right? Or whatever that may be. So really specialized. And that was awesome to see because baseball before that was like, it was called an old boys sport, right? It was like, you smoked a cigar before you went out and played, right? Like that's like literally what they were doing in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There was no science whatsoever involved. You iced after you pitched like 300 pitches, you would just throw your elbow in a bit of ice as you're drinking champagne, right? Like that was performance. And so they were really at the cutting edge of bringing that in. And that's really common now. So that was cool to see. I got to work with the athletic training staff. I got to work with the strength and conditioning performance staff and really see that. I got the opportunity to actually go work with them. And I would have had to, the challenge would have been, I wouldn't have been able to finish my degree. They wanted me to start literally in the spring. So I was like, okay, well, I only got 6 months left. Like I kind of put a lot of effort. I'd like to get this degree. And, secondly, at the time, the job was actually going to be in the Dominican Republic. And it was a pretty common kind of rite of passage. You start in the Dominican Republic, you kind of earn your way up, right, as you call it. And there's a path to do that. And the other thing I kind of thought about was, I didn't know at the time my girlfriend who I had met was going to be my wife, but I knew there was some longevity to this. And she's an athletic trainer because we were in the same program, but she does it for performing artists. And like immediately, like, I'm like, there's no performing arts industry in the Dominican Republic, right? Like, maybe at resorts, but I don't think athletic training is a big thing there, right? So slept on it a lot and I ended up just kind of passing on that decision, which was fruitful. And obviously it worked out in its own way. And I'm a big believer in like manifestation and things work out the way they should. So yeah, so I ended up actually coming back to my alma mater at Chapman. Pam Gibbons, a great mentor of mine. She's the director of sports medicine there. She hired me on as a athletic trainer at left. So I got to go back to the SCIAC, back where I started, be an athletic trainer is really cool. Some of the athletes were still there. I knew a lot of the staff there, so it felt like home. I worked with football, volleyball, and men's basketball and lacrosse, which was great. And, that really allowed me to kind of etch my own. I think that when I look back on that experience, it was incredibly helpful because I went from being like a student intern to like, now this is like my job, right? Like I'm the person that the student intern was kind of relying on, it's that flip thing where when you're a student intern, you're like, hey, I have some responsibility, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with this person, right? And I can rely on them. And now I was that person and I had my own interns. So that was like a weird but fun transition, right? And I got to work with, my mentors in such a different capacity. I learned so much. But it also allowed me the opportunity to kind of think more on what I wanted for my future. At that point I was 22, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to go down the path and I want to be head athletic trainer somewhere for the next 10 years at a community college or, at a university, right? Is that my destiny, or do I want to figure some stuff out?
Athletic trainers, you've got a plan for everything. But when seconds count, is your emergency action plan as ready as you are? Meet Easy EAP, the digital emergency action plan app built specifically for athletics. Easy EAP puts your EAPs right at your fingertips on your phone, tablet, or laptop so you can act fast, stay compliant, and keep your athletes safe. Update protocols in real time, share with staff instantly, send mass alerts, and carry every venue's plan in your pocket. No more binders, no more digging. It's time to modernize your emergency prep. Visit easyeap.com and be ready for anything. Easy EAP, your plan when it matters most.
Are you an athletic training student dreading the BOC exam? After years of school and thousands of dollars of tuition, you shouldn't have to rely on outdated flashcards, expensive textbooks, or pen and paper practice tests that look nothing like the real computerized exam. That's where AT Study Buddy comes in. Created by athletic trainers for athletic training students, AT Study Buddy is the online study platform built for today's tech-savvy learners. You'll get 7 full-length practice exams that feel just like the real BOC, plus 10 domain-specific tests and more than 250 interactive study tools like drag and drops, flashcards, anatomy hotspots, and fill-in-the-blank modules. You can retake exams, review your results, and actually track your progress. And the best part, AT Study Buddy users consistently report first-time pass rates above the national average. Students, educators, international professionals transitioning to the US, and even certified athletic trainers coming back from lapses are using it to step confidently into the next phase of their careers. For about the price of a single practice test, you get a full month of unlimited access, or ask your program about discounted group license with faculty dashboards that help support your success. Study smarter, not harder. With AT Study Buddy, your journey to certification starts here.
I really just had a lot of self-reflection, a lot of like emotions coming up, and I'm just like, I don't know where to go with this. So long story short, I ended up getting my CSCS, which I will say that is a very difficult test. If anyone's ever taken that, I was very surprised by that. And so I got my CSCS because I was like, well, if I'm gonna maybe branch out into some other stuff, I need to increase my skill set. So I got my CSCS, and where I went in my mind at that point was, I'm a great practitioner, but I'm not good at, let's just say sales, right? Or conversational stuff, because I knew maybe at that point, I was like, what if I started my own sports performance facility, right? At that time, it wasn't as popular. Today, there's like one on every block, but it was like therapy, right? You'd have a big building and one side was therapy and one side was training and performance. And I was like, dude, I want to do that. That sounds awesome, right? And then I realized, and there's this great like business philosophy, you could be a great baker, but you could be terrible at running a bakery, right? They're not the same skill set. So I was a great athletic trainer, but I wasn't going to be great at running a sports performance facility because they require different skill sets. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I said, I'm going to get my CSCS. I'm going to go get a personal training job at 24 Hour Fitness, LA Fitness, right? I just want to eat what I kill, right? I want to talk to people, close people on the concept of like improving their wellness, put them in a personal training package. And I want to get really good at that because that's like, it's like the equivalent of like knocking on doors to sell Teflon, right? If you're going to build a skill set of like conversation, sales, you're going to go do that. Like that's the hardest thing to do. So I started applying to jobs, see if I can do both at the same time, right? Because the Chapman contract was a 10-month contract, right? So I had 2 months during the summer I wasn't working. Don't find any, 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness personal training jobs. I actually get reached out to by a recruiter. And her name's Carly David, and I still have a great relationship with her. And she says, hey, we are hiring for like stretch provider, stretch therapist at this place called Stretch Lab. And no joke, I literally in my head, I'm like, that's the stupidest job I've ever done. Like, why would a normal person who's not an athlete want to get stretched? Right? Like, it just did not comprehend to me because like our whole education is like stretching is, obviously kind of on like the lower totem pole of therapies you can do. It's helpful, but there's other therapies you'd want to focus on first. Plus only athletes need it, right? Like, and so in my head, I'm like, okay, well, tell me more, but I wasn't that interested. I have a second interview. They bring me to this office in Newport. I get to meet this gentleman, Verdine Baker, who's actually the CEO at the company I'm at. I've followed him to 2 companies. He's a great mentor of mine. And he kind of starts selling me the vision of like where wellness and recovery is going. And, granted, this was before like Hyperice takes off. This is before like you see all these companies now, like wellness and recovery as an economy and as an industry is like massive, right? Like it's massive now. But at like 10, 12 years ago, this was all startup stuff. So I was more interested. And I said, you know what? Like I've stretched 300-pound linemen. I could stretch 150-pound housewife in Orange County, right? Like if that's what the job's going to be. And I really said at the time, I was like, look, worst case scenario, this doesn't work out. I have a job in athletic training. I could go back into that industry and I can work my way up and, I'll figure that out. Best case scenario, this thing takes off. And, as I always say, like 12 years later, here I am, right? So it works out. It worked out the way I had hoped it did. But it wasn't like the point I want to make is it wasn't like this super clear linear path. And it's not like I saw my path. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck when they're looking to make a change or if they're interested in making a change is everything has to be decided. It has to be guaranteed. You have to know exactly where you're going. And I would say talking to people and mentors and just people I've learned over time, 9 times out of 10, it's always a leap of faith, right? And you figure it out as you go. You take a step, there's a whole bunch of clouds in front of you. You can't see where you're going, but you have faith and you have skills and you have trust and confidence in yourself. And you just keep taking a step each time and you keep asking yourself, is this aligning me in the path I want to go? And if it is, then you keep taking those steps and you hope for the best. And if it's not aligning you, then, you start back again and you go look for a different path. So yeah, that's how I've gotten to this point.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've started when I'm pitching students and they're like, well, what do you know about athletic training? Like, what should I do? I had a great conversation when I was in Philadelphia with a student that was just on the sideline. Like he was watching a friend and I was like, well, where do you want to end up? Like, you have to really be kind of thoughtful when you're going into this career because everybody, some people are built for high school, which is great. Some people college. And then there's those people that want the professional elite athletes, which is great. I'm not knocking that at all. But, when you keep having that end goal of professional setting or professional athletics, I feel like that puts a cap on you at the same time of, well, if you look at the structure of athletic training, there's only so many levels that you can probably advance through at a department or a school or an organization, which I'm hoping that we address at some point, that there's still room to grow or advance, even if there's only 3 positions in the athletic training clinic. But what draws you to that professional athletic team? Why do you want to work with that level of athlete or that organization? You have to really understand those little details because I think that's where we get caught up. And I'm grateful that these programs have opened the clinical experience to the professional teams. But at the same time, I don't think that the student is getting the best experience because they can only do so much. There's a lot of liability at those teams. And I feel those athletes want to work with the certifieds most of the time. I mean, their career, there's a lot of money on the line.
And if you don't mind, I'd love to add something to that kind of tags on just through my experiences. For myself, when I look back on it, like, why did I want to work in professional sports? it was like the allure of it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it
Hmm.
was like marketed to me as a young kid playing in sports. It's like you want to work in, the end all be alls to be up in that level, right? Because they're on TV and they're on Wheaties
Yeah.
boxes and,
I'm
you know,
associated
they're
with them.
yeah, and I'm associated with them exactly because I'm on the team. We'll come to find out, like, you don't get paid a lot. The hours are crazy.
Hmm.
And all that to say, like, if that's your thing, right, and you want to do that, you got to do that, right? So I think if it's engaging work for you and you know all it comes with, like, you should do that. But for me, I kind of got to peek behind the curtain a little bit, and I was like, whoa, this is not like, obviously if you're an athlete, right, like
Hmm.
some of those things come about. But if you're the support staff, it's pretty tough, right, for various reasons. But also, like, you would love to think that recognition is there, and people like the athletes are always grateful, but that's not always the case, right? You just handle personalities.
Yeah.
And so, beyond that as well, the point I was going to make with being in those industries, what I'm seeing now a lot of times too, because I work with with a lot of professional athletes in the industry I'm in. So I'm either talking with them or I'm around them. A lot of them actually have their own athletic trainers.
Yeah.
Like they don't really use, like, LeBron James doesn't use the athletic trainer for the
On
Lakers. Like,
staff. Yeah.
he has his own guy. You know what I mean? So like that guy comes into the Lakers facility, does work with him, so on and so forth. So that's getting really popular as well. So there's avenues to, attach to individual athletes, right? There's avenues to like create your own persona and your own business around that if going into the traditional organization maybe isn't something that's of interest to you.
Yeah. No, and exactly, as there's that association, and then you think you're gonna be the influence on getting them across the line, that performance portion of it. But yeah, at that level, they are starting to do personal athletic trainers or staff, they're very invested in what they're gonna put out. So I think that's a great point, is the different avenues of being able to work with those types of athletes. I figured out that, I mean, I wanted to work professional soccer for the longest time. I worked at the academy, and I found that that was more fulfilling at the end of the day, because I'm creating the building blocks for them to be a professional athlete. And then I'm going to be able to see them, go on and be a part of the national team, the professional team, go to the Premier League, whatever it may be. But I felt like it was more conducive to, how do I help develop this athlete so that they're more marketable at the end of the day? Because that's what the academy is how do you sell that athlete's contract? And I think that's kind of a disservice on how academies are set up, is they're usually like brand new certified athletic trainers that get put in those positions because it's not the glamorous position. And then you work your way up to the first team. And I think it should be the opposite way. If a professional organization really wants to create something, is you have to feed the bottom layer, and then it's actually going to be a better investment, because you're going to be able to pull from that roster for your first team, and they're going to be in the system. They're going to understand the procedures, the plays, all that stuff. And that's where I haven't fully grasped, I'm a big soccer fan. That's the problem with US soccer and why US soccer players suck. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll give you the answer right there.
No, I mean, it is. I mean, I saw it, like the training facilities, I think, in like how performance and training at like those levels, let's just take soccer, and how it's viewed in Europe and like Australia is just on another level from the US. I mean, it's just night and day.
Yeah. So yeah, back to like these student athletic trainers, you know, you have to really understand what patients you want to treat or what you're trying to achieve. And then you also have to take the level of your personal life. Do you want to have a family? Like, what else do you want to achieve outside of work? And I think that's where, there's a change happening in athletic training. Is we used to really identify, I'm an athletic trainer, that's all I do, because I'm always at work. They're always, I'm kind of dependent on the team, because I think that their success depends on me being there 24/7. And I think now we're starting to see that break of work-life balance, and you have to develop that outside life a little bit more if you want to have a family, if you want to get married, if you have animals, I don't know,
Yeah.
your different hobbies. So, I think we need to start having those conversations a little bit more strategically when we're trying to recruit athletic training students, and at the same time of them trying to figure out the path that they want to end up in. And that's why there's a big shift into like the military, the industrial setting, is that it is providing that balance, and they're also paying very well. So they've kind of captured why it's important to have athletic trainers in these settings and are able to provide better numbers like ROI and all that stuff on days missed. And there's more on the line in those settings, I feel, than athletics, even though there is more on the line still, but it's just a different dynamic. And we've been able to capture it very well in those other settings that are growing right now.
I think that's a like reemphasize is like, money's not the end all be all, right? So don't make your decisions off money, because I've met plenty of well-off people that are pretty unhappy, right? And vice versa. Obviously, I think the key take home and what's difficult in many settings of athletic training is like you need a minimum kind of baseline of living, right? If you're going to have, to your point, kids, you're going to have a spouse, right? You're going to, I call it the white picket fence dream that we've all been sold, right? Like, let's chalk it up to that. That costs a certain amount of dollars, right? And if you don't want that, great, right? If you want something traditional, then, whatever you need to meet that, right? So I think the goal is not to have as much money as possible. The goal is to be aligned in your work, right? To be mentally stimulated, to feel like you're growing, to feel like you have growth opportunities. And so to your point, right? Like a military industrial has done a really great job of blending those things more so than potentially that's occurring in like a traditional setting, right? That's been there in the past.
Yeah. So once you got into Stretch Lab, it became a therapist, or what, I don't know what the proper terminology is.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
So obviously you kind of stuck with it. I guess, how did you make yourself seen within the company to be able to move up within the ranks?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, I'll kind of start with like why I really liked the stretch. We trademarked the term flexologist. It was like a cool, trademark. It's kind of like a, hocus pocus name, but it's fun. But they are, stretch practitioners, stretch therapists, whatever you want to call it. The reason I kind of gravitated towards it when I eventually, got hired and then I stuck with it was I got to curate my own plans and like build my own relationships with the people I was seeing. And I felt like I had a lot of like control and autonomy. And that's like really important to me. And not to say you can't get that in the traditional setting, but, I was setting my own schedule. I was like deciding which clients I wanted to work with. I was building my own programs. And, I can say personally from like when I worked in pro sports or collegiate, you don't get a lot of that, right? Like, if the head basketball coach, right, at the collegiate place I was working at, if he was like, oh, hey, practice isn't at 9 a.m., it's at 1 p.m., right? Because I want to go to breakfast with my daughter. Well, I had made my whole day schedule based on the fact practice was at 9, right? Maybe I had plans at 1 o'clock to hang out with my wife, and now I got to go to my wife the morning up and be like, hey, we can't do that because someone decided to change practice. So you're at like the lowest, you're not making decisions, right? Things are trickling down to you, whether it's like the practice schedules or the games or whatever that is. You're very reactive, truthfully, and I don't like being reactive. I like being in control. And so that's what kind of drew me to it. And then the work was rewarding in the same way that, traditional athletic training is rewarding. I think that's what keeps a lot of athletic trainers there, is the rewarding, the feeling of the work when you connect with someone and you help them achieve their goals. And you see that progression, right? I mean, I know that's what still drives me today in the work I do. And that's what drew me to athletic training. So, how I made myself be seen, I just did really good work. Like in the business world, like we don't have this in athletic training, right? But what I also like about the business world is it's very performance based. And I was an athlete, right? So I align with performance based. Like in business, it's very common to have KPIs, right? Revenue, new clients coming in, so on and so forth. You don't really have that in athletic training. Like you're not sitting down each month with, your boss and they're saying like, hey, you got 10 people back to, return to play, or, you prevented 2 ACL injuries, right? Or you did this. And so the reason I like performance is because you get that immediate feedback, but also that helps with your pay. If I'm performing better, then there's more opportunities for me to grow. There's a way to measure it. And I can, whether it's growing in roles or opportunities or income. Athletic training, it's not like, and I'm kind of giving a broad example here, but it's not like, hey, you saved a life this year, right? Like you resuscitated someone, you get an extra 50K, right? Like there's no performance incentive, right? Like you just do it out of the goodness of your heart. Like you should save that person, right? It shouldn't be like, do I make enough to save them? You should do it. You should tape that ankle. You should do the prehab. But that's, I think, the crux of it. And where a lot of athletic trainers get burnt out is there's a lot of things that really should have performative based metrics and opportunity to grow, but it ends up just being well, that's just what you should do. Right. And not a lot of jobs are like that. Like most jobs are very performative based. And so you end up kind of just doing a whole bunch and not getting a lot of rewards for it. Right. Besides the internal gratification you get, right? Which that can only last you so long. And so that's where I mean, I was doing literally what normal athletic trainers do. I was like, I'm just doing this out of the goodness of my heart. I'm going to help these clients. I'm going to make great programs. And that caught the attention of the executives above. They were like, man, this guy's really hardworking. He's really disciplined. He's really smart. Like he has a lot of knowledge as an athletic, like as about the body. Like he communicates really well. He builds great relationships with the staff and the members. He's getting results in the programs. And what's funny, Shelby, is like in our minds, as athletic trainers going through degrees, we're programmed to like, that's the normal, like that's the baseline. Like if you're just going to be an average athletic trainer, you should be able to do those things. But and everywhere else outside of athletic training, you're a superhero. Like you're a superhero. Like, so you just have to bring those skill sets sometimes outside of the normality of our industry. And people are going to be like, oh my gosh, like that's off the chart. So that's like what ended up happening. Like in my mind, I'm like, I'm just being a normal athletic trainer and doing what I'm supposed to do. In their mind, they're like, wow, like this is amazing. So I got lucky early on, you know, beyond that, the company was growing really quickly. So they were looking for people to go around and open up, help open up stores. Cause we were in the growth phase and we were going to open up stores. So they're like, hey, we need people to kind of fly around the country and train other stretch therapists, right? To train the trainer model. They called them like master trainers, right? So I heard about it and I threw my hat in there and I was like, I'm really interested in this. And, I was kind of going back and forth. I'm like, well, I have this other job as well. So I need to be cognizant of like my travel schedule, right? Because I'm a full-time athletic trainer at Chapman. Did it a couple times at corporate where I trained some people and I got really great feedback that I'm a great teacher and I'm a great instructor. And I was able to help them, achieve what they wanted to achieve. And it just moved really quickly and a lot of stars aligned, honestly. The person who was like their director of education at the time, he was Australian. He was hired to kind of come on board and kind of start the training program and be a face for the program. But he was never really meant to be with the company long term because he lives in Australia. This is a US based company at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they were looking for someone to kind of come on in corporate full time and lead a training program and build a training program so that we could train thousands of stretch therapists every year. I think the most I ever did was my team and I, we trained like 5,000 stretch therapists in 1 year, right? Because we opened up 100 studios, 150 studios a month. So it's like, how do you build a great training? I mean, it almost became like, I almost started thinking about like, okay, I'm like almost like my professors at Chapman. Like, how do I bring in all these students? How do I make sure they leave with certain competencies? And how do I do it in a quick fashion, right? So I had to get in that mindset. And so I started that in 2019. I had to make a decision, right? Because at that point, a full-time job, I couldn't do Chapman anymore. So I had to have a tough conversation with that staff, which was hard because I'm still close with them. I was close with them at the time. It was also like weird too, right? Because I remember telling my family I was going to go do this stretching thing, right? I was going to be a director of education and teach people how to stretch and open these stores. And I look back on it and a lot of people in my life, rightfully so, thought I was crazy. They were like, don't do it. What is this you're doing? So on and so forth. And when I look back on it and when I look at making decisions today, if a lot of people are telling me not to do it, I should do it. Because most people think alike. Most people are not, they don't like to go against the stream, right? They like to be conformative, right?
Yeah.
So if you're really going to do something special, you always have to go against the grain. And so anytime I'm making a decision nowadays, I kind of take a poll, and I would say 90% of the time, if most people are telling me not to do it, I'm like, this is a good decision to make because I just think differently. My brain is wired differently than most people. So I can't rely on validation of most people.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of how I got started into Stretch Lab.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the conformity of athletic training, like you had said, I feel that if you are a fan of socialized healthcare, but you're not a fan of how athletic training is ran in the traditional setting, then that shows that socialized healthcare is not going to work.
Right.
Because you're just trying to get as many people treated, evaluated as you can, but you're on a strict budget. And then at the same time, with the traditional setting, most of them are secure jobs. So you're getting paid that salary and you're just outputting as much as you can, where you're going to have to take a little bit more risk if you're going to want to make more money. And I don't think athletic trainers are comfortable enough to understand the give and take of that. And with the KPIs and stuff, everything we do is healthcare at the end of the day, with the performance, the prevention screenings, all that different stuff. But I think that we need to approach it as this is an individual project that we're putting forth, such as doing SFMA or FMS screenings. If you want to start implementing that, you need to get some sort of agreement that we're going to implement this, but we're going to need a little bit more money, even though it's going to help with the secondary insurance costs at the end of the day, because that's an ROI that can be easily translated to show that you're putting in parameters to help decrease injury occurrence. I think COVID was the best example of the hazard pay that we never got. We were the front lines. We were the guinea pigs. We went out and put COVID policies in place to test them out, and the rest of the schools weren't even operating. They were still at a distance, and nobody actually...
Nurses were getting 5 times rates, 12 times rates. So it's available, right? It was available in the healthcare industry. It just didn't trickle down.
And we think we're just doing our job, and we have to break away from that at the end of the day. So it's interesting that we want to fly under the radar, but we want to be paid more, but we're not actually stepping up and, advocating of, we can make this better, but we're just going to need a little bit more. And that's with scope of practice. We keep increasing scope of practice, but then we're not actually putting any dollar amounts on what this is going to help at the end of the day. And then even job descriptions, that's where I got cornered, was they had that statement and responsibilities assigned as needed. Redline that out of any contract you go into, because that's your negotiating power right there if they start asking more from you. And I think it's just those little details that athletic trainers need to be more savvy about when they're going into jobs is, you need to make it cut and dry. And then you need to have KPIs, the key performance measures, so that when you have these annual, biannual, whatever, how many ever times you're meeting with your supervisor, you can actually go through and show what you're accomplishing, and then be able to give feedback of, well, this is what else I can contribute, but that's just going to take more time from my usual schedule. So either we need to hire someone else to start taking on some of these other responsibilities, or I need to be compensated more. And so we just keep throwing that strategy out the door at this point.
Check out clinicallypressed.org/courses for access to free CEUs for athletic trainers. Register and enroll in as many CEUs as you'd like. New CEUs coming on a monthly basis, including from your host of To The Bone with Shelby Daly. Get ahead of your CEUs by listening to podcasts and getting credit for it. Clinically Pressed Company, making complicated simple through results that give back. Find out more at clinicallypressed.org.
Hey friends, quick break to talk about something that's changing the game in sports medicine: red light therapy. We're talking real science and results. There are over 4,000 research papers showing how light can help with inflammation, pain, tissue healing, swelling, and musculoskeletal conditions. The team at Fringe took that research and created red light therapy tools designed by rehab experts and sports medicine professionals, built to deliver light directly to the tissues that need it most, promoting healing from the inside out. And get this, no wires, no EMF, no flicker, and absolutely no bad vibes. Whether you're running a clinic, working in an athletic training room, or recovering at home, these tools are a game changer for performance and recovery. Check them out at fringeheals.com and get 10% off with the code TOTHEBONE10. That's TOTHEBONE10 for 10% off.
the best time, like the best negotiating power you're going to have, and the best opportunity you have to get a raise is before you accept the job, right? Because once you take the job, I mean, in any industry, it's like, it's really hard to get those beyond like your 1 to 3%, right? It's really hard to make a quick jump. That's why a lot of people make movements to, other jobs nowadays. Being thoughtful in your questions, right? Things that I would think about if I'm in the traditional setting and I'm wanting to learn more as I'm hiring a job, as I'm, looking for a job. One, like how much is budgeted for this role, right? And how are budgeting decisions made in this organization, right? So if I'm at a high school, right, or I'm at, a collegiate organization, how does whoever makes the decisions, right, the president of the school or the AD, like how are they strategically thinking about like this is worth X, right? Is it just because of like that's what the last person took? In that case, you have a lot of conversational power to say like, well, it doesn't really sound then that, we're actually being analytical about this job, right? We're not really looking at the scope of what this job entails and what that may be. Do they have like some good answers, right? Maybe it could be something as simple as like you're in high school and they're like, hey, to be honest with you, we're funded by the government and, we have budget cuts. So, all we have is DK. Let's just call it that. At that point, you're making a decision, right? Is that what your time's worth? Because time, it's a common phrase, but it's really true. Time is money, right? Like basically you accepting 60, 70, 80, 90, $1 million salary is you trading your time for it, right? Is your time worth what it entails to do that 60K work? And in some cases, right, you might get a job that's worth 60K and it's worth it because, you have super defined roles and responsibilities. It's not jobs as, duties as assigned, super clear what you're supposed to do. And you have a lot of support, right? You have a team versus the job where it's like, hey, it's 60K, it's all on you. And, you have a lot of responsibilities. That might be good for someone that is willing to take that money and get the experience. But then you're looking at, exiting in 1 to 2 years when you get that experience to leverage that in some way. You always have to think about whatever it is you're doing, like a job, even if it's a contracting side gig, everything has value, right? Even the job you have right now has value for the next job you're going to have or the next phase of your life, right? So you want to look at, for the money I'm making, how can I maximize this work? How many new skills can I learn? How many relationships can I build that are going to serve me in the future? How many, what can I maximize out of this? And when you get to the point where you're like, look, I can't maximize this anymore, right? Say it's, an entry level job or a middle level job in traditional athletic training that you've been there for 3-5 years, right? Maybe you do look at like, do I need to move, right? So those are things you should be analytical about. And those are things, at least in my experiences, were not taught when I was coming out of school, right? So those are things I had to learn on my own that I wish would have been a part of, the traditional career route as I was getting out of work, right? So that would have been helpful.
Yeah. Well, and it's even at, the high school level, yes, there's a lot of restrictions, but there's the goals of the athletic department, but you also have to relate it to the student portion of it. And you have to look at the mission and goals of that institution. And, I would say a common goal would be reduce time lost in the classroom. So, illness and all that. And you can definitely segue that into athletic training of, well, if kids are getting injured, they're going to have to miss school to go to the doctor because the doctor's office works between, 8 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, right, when people are in school. So, it's it's that whole elevator speech that we talked about at the beginning. You have to know your stakeholders and what their goals are. You could be the best athletic trainer, but if you can't translate how you guys are supposed to work together as an employee and your supervisor, how are you supposed to translate goals and better it for both parties at the end of the day? So that'd be my advice on when you're negotiating also.
I like what I think is what you explained well. Anytime I'm trying to explain something or negotiate something or talk about it, I always want to talk about the why, behind what I'm talking about. Sometimes we get caught up in just saying the what, right? Like this is important. Like I want this or whatever it may be. But if we can like really eloquently or detailed explain why this connects to this what and why it's important, which you hit on, generally we're going to be more successful.
Yeah. Well, even getting those extra credentials, or like you had said, how much can I get out of this employer while I'm there, is, if there is no strength and conditioning program or one on staff, maybe it's, well, will you pay for my CSCS so then I can
Yeah.
provide more skills? And then later down the line, if you have to hire someone, you have somebody knowledgeable in that space that can provide good feedback on what they should be looking for to fill that position at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah. And then that goes along with KPIs also, is you set those goals. Once you achieve it, you have that, kickback of, yeah, I might make an extra, I don't know, $2,000 a year because I achieved that KPI. And this is how I'm implementing it into the system. So it's just making sure you have those safety nets of why you're doing certain things and why they're being added onto your plate. I think we forget about also. And always renegotiate your contract twice a year, once a year, whenever you can get in front of them. You have to fight for yourself, and that's the best way to do it.
Always have a backup option too. So the point I'm making with that is, when I talked about my switch to Stretch Lab, well, yes, there were pieces that were definitely luck that were involved, but there were pieces that, I created opportunity for myself as well. And you have to always create you have to increase your surface area for luck, right? Because everyone, for the most part, everyone that gets started or anything that works off generally always starts with luck, right? But you have to increase your surface area for it. So if I'm just super focused on, at that point, right? If I was just super focused at Chapman or being super focused at my high school, I'm not increasing my area of luck if I'm not building relationships, I'm not learning new skills, right? I'm just kind of being stagnant in my place. But the other area of it was I was willing for a 4-month period to work 60 hours a week because I was doing 40 hours, call it 40, 50 hours at my college job. And then I was working 15, 20 hours on the weekends or, before or after work at Stretch Lab, right? And if I hadn't gone, I look back at it, right? If I hadn't gone through that process of like, I'm going to get my CSCS, I'm going to, become a personal trainer. Oh, wait, have this call. Oh, wait, start this job. Like, give a lot of my time towards it, learn new skills. Like none of that would have happened. You know what I mean? So sometimes the transition, if you're looking um, if you're looking to either have more opportunity to leverage your existing job and get more money, or you're looking to move into industrial or military or somewhere else, sometimes it's easier to do that when you have like a side hustle or additional skill set, right? Doesn't feel as right, versus like, oh, it's either this or I don't have a job, right? Because that's where a lot of people get stuck, right? It's either I continue to put up with what I have or I don't have a job. And that's a tough decision to make, right? So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, slowly add additional streams or avenues for yourself over time, and that'll help as well.
Yeah. Well, it's just making you a bigger target at the end of the day. I like the surface area one, but I don't like that we keep downplaying the importance of volunteering free time also. Yes, money is important, but I mean, when I graduated, I didn't want to settle right for a high school job, even though that would have been an easy segue. Since I wanted this performance, high performance setting, professional at the end of the day, I made so many great connections by volunteering in general. I mean, beach volleyball is a big event in Southern California. I was doing the US Open for skateboarding and BMX, and I still talk to a lot of those contacts all the time, and they've actually helped me get my foot in the door in other places. And yes, we need to be compensated for our skills, but those networks, athletic training is such a very small pool at the end of the day. And to get into these positions where you're really striving to be in, it's really who you know, not necessarily the skills you have, is what I've come to find out very slowly. It's really people putting you in front of the correct people so that you can advocate for yourself, and, making a bigger target for yourself, or the surface area example, back to the elevator speech. You're able to create conversations so much easier if you have a touch point of commonality with somebody. And you can, it's not just talking about, oh, I saw this injury or all these different things. Nobody really wants to talk about those unless it's the right thing. But in a professional setting, it's, our connection. You went on to be in the wellness space rather than the traditional athletic training. And, I saw the skill sets of the dysfunctional breathing, and it was like, I think this would be a great segue. And we had a great conversation, and you saw the need for it, but it just wasn't fitting that vision at that point. So, it's just using your connections at the end of the day.
And it evolves, right? The relationship evolves and it continues. And that's what's really fun.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's us talking 10 years later of knowing each other. So with your new brand, I'm assuming that they are competitors of each other. But I also thought it was interesting that most of your team had left the other setting and has come to this new business. And I guess, how has that transition been since you're with the same team? And how is this new company benefiting you and making sure you're fulfilling your buckets of passion?
Yeah, great question. I guess to give more context on that first. So StretchLab was a part of a portfolio of brands. And so the major franchisor, the big name, was Exponential Fitness. So in franchising, sometimes the franchise is individually owned and operated, or sometimes they're a part of a portfolio. Another portfolio example that a lot of people know is like Yum Brands, that owns like KFC and I think Wendy's and a couple other brands, right? But then each of those brands obviously operate independently on their own. It's just a portfolio conglomerate that's like a holding company at the top. So at Exponential, our goal was very early on to kind of curate the largest and the best fitness and wellness concepts under one portfolio, and to be the first to do that, which we were. Because at the time, fitness franchising was very segmented. Good example. Everyone knows Orange Theory Fitness. I work out there. I'm a big fan. They, before at that time, like they were individually owned. It was just OTF, right? And they ran their own business. No one had really brought a bunch under one roof. And so we had StretchLab, we had Club Pilates, which is and still today the largest Pilates studio, boutique fitness studio in the world. Cycle Bar, which was the largest in the cycling space. Pure Bar, Yoga 6, I'm forgetting some of the others and they've changed out, but you kind of get the concept. So StretchLab was one of those brands. And when I came on board, I knew the opportunity was to kind of be involved in the stretching space and specifically focus on StretchLab. But what was cool was that, eventually we brought on some other brands and, stretching and the people I would learn, I guess the skill sets I had and the people that I would meet in the other brands like Pilates, right? There's a lot of synergy there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of synergy with the brand we had, BFT, because it was all about like performance training, right? Like that brand is kind of like F45. In a sense, where it's kind of like circuit workouts. And so I'd meet with their education people and it was fun to learn because it kind of got me back in my CSCS mind, right? And that's how all those people were. So it was a cool cross-pollination. That we started, when I started StretchLab, there were 5 stores. When I left last year, there was 500 plus stores, plus international locations that I helped open in Tokyo, Mexico City, Kuwait, Canada. And it was a great ride, right? I think for me personally, I'm always energized by growth and no business can grow infinitely. You're going to go through, waves and differences. And so the other piece of that was the company became public around 2021, I think. We took the company public on the New York Stock Exchange. Really cool experience. I got to go to the New York Stock Exchange in like Manhattan. I got to see the bell be rung. I got to be, walk in there, be a part of the experience. We were literally in Times Square and we saw like our billboard up in Times Square. It was crazy. I never thought I'd get to that point. And, there's pros and cons to being a public company, right? One of the cons is you're always, focused on the shareholder. And so in franchising, what we really try to focus on is the franchisee, right? Because they're individual business entrepreneurs. They, put their money on the line to open a business. And, sometimes, though those two interests don't always align, right? Because the shareholders want the franchisor to make more money, but that doesn't always mean the franchisee is making money. And so it gets really challenging. So for those two reasons, I kind of just looked at an opportunity to grow. I was looking at different other jobs at the time, had a couple offers and landed on iFlex. And at that time, the person who was the president at StretchLab had left to come over here. And a lot of the early founders of a lot of the early team or the founders at Exponential had left at that period after 8 to 10 years to come start this new company called Sequel. You can guess why the company is named as it is, right? It's a sequel of what we did before.
Yeah.
So obviously Exponential, StretchLab, those brands, they're still alive. They're not going anywhere. And there's teams there, right? Sequel is an opportunity for us to start something new again from the ground up and to really bring what is the future of fitness and wellness today, right? And bring that today. So with each of our brands, right? Like our Pilates brand, it's kind of like a futuristic modern version of what we've done in the past. Same thing with iFlex, where I'm at. How can we leverage? I talked about the AI movement technology. That's just the beginning. Like we're doing a lot of cool stuff I can't talk about. That's just future high tech things that are happening. And then even some of the brands we've brought on. So one of the recent brands that we brought on is called Ultimate Longevity Clinic. And it's a partnership with Tony Robbins, like the speaker, Tony Robbins, like he's on our team. And this gentleman named Gary Brecka, who's like the foremost expert in biohacking and health. And we're pairing them together with us to create the Ultimate Longevity Clinic. So you'll have two sides of this business where like you can literally take your blood, it'll give you all these readings. And then you can receive different services from peptides to IV to like, there's going to be a hyperbaric chamber in there. There's going to be, all this supplementation, like just really cutting edge stuff that's coming out today, to what's interesting. So that's, really how this was born. And that's what excited me was, I'd done something great in the past. It was an awesome experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. And, I was ready for what was next.
Well, and I think that's where my mind obviously went a little different. But, the public stock exchange portion of money is really important to when you're still kind of privately just grinding, really trying to create a good product. Really, it's your relationship with the customer rather than the money base.
Yeah, exactly. Versus the shareholder. Yeah.
Yeah. And it made me think of the parallel of when you're working with a hospital system as an athletic trainer versus like, the traditional setting. I would say, I think we do provide the best care. It's just that there are some limitations on the money flow. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's separate interests,
Yeah. So I think that's where, selling your soul, I would say, to be publicly traded, just so that there are more revenue streams, more money flowing into the company. I think athletic trainers need to be weary about those different business transactions at the end of the day. Is you can provide the best care, but there's going to be some hangups. What am I thinking?
Yeah, it's like a consequence to every decision you make, right?
Yeah.
When we tried to go public, we had it for all the right intentions, and obviously we'd never gone public before, so it's one of those things where you kind of learn along the way. And there were some pros and there were definitely some cons, as you go through that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's even just like third-party reimbursement. You get handcuffed on everything that you can do because there's so much you can bill out.
Yep, exactly. You don't control the price point on that. And then it starts influencing your decision-making, right? Maybe the clinic you work for only wants you to do certain treatments because that's what they get reimbursed the highest for, but it's not necessarily the best decision for the client. And so, that can go down a long run.
Yeah. So the efficiency gets taken away when there's money involved sometimes. So just one of those business aspects we don't talk about enough.
The beauties of capitalism.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, we can talk forever. I would love to have you on again. Let me know what we want to talk about next time.
Yeah, this was so fun.
Yeah, I love having these free-flowing conversations and just talking about ideas. But I know you're a busy guy and you got to get back to your corporate job.
Gotta sneak out of here and get some meetings going.
Yep.
But thank you so much for this. This was so fun. And I'd love to do it again. So let's definitely coordinate on that. But I love just, having these conversations back and forth and just having it being so free flowing. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for being on, and we'll have you on again.
All right. Thanks, Shelby.
Yeah.
That's it for today's episode of To the Bone. I hope we've sparked some new thoughts, challenged your perspectives, or simply reminded you to dig a little deeper. Remember, life isn't just about what's on the surface. Sometimes you've got to cut deeper and get to the bone of what really matters. To the Bone podcast is a product of Daily LLC. It's hosted and produced by Shelby Daly, ATC, and Randy Daly. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. For more on the show, visit www.tothebonepodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Get involved in the conversation. You can find us at www.tothebonepodcast.com. Drop us topic suggestions or be a potential guest. We're all about connecting with you, our listeners. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep cutting deep.